levels have a bad reputation. Often we remember them as annoying, frustrating, claustrophobic. Even the best games have water levels that have become notorious. However, of all the games, of all the consoles, of all the generations, there is no water level more reviled than that in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES. Before we get to the horrors below the sea, let's briefly talk about the game. As with most licensed games of the era, this is a platformer. Players are given control over all 4 of the turtles, and can switch between them at any time. Each turtle attacks with their specific weapon, though due to the differences between each weapon's power and range, there's a large discrepancy between the usefulness of each turtle. Raphael and Michelangelo are both short range and relatively useless. These guys are sadly relegated to being the meat shields of the game, used only when the player knows they're inevitably going to take damage, and don't want to waste their stronger turtles. Leonardo is the workhorse of the 4, with decent range and speed to his attack. Don
is the destroyer of worlds,
with a long-range attack that makes mincemeat of most enemies, and even some bosses. Don was always my favourite as a kid, so this arrangement is fine with me. The game moves between an overworld map and side-scrolling stages. Contrary to what you might expect for a game based on a franchise for children, Turtles is very tough. Enemies respawn whenever the screen scrolls, and when a turtle is captured, you're sent right back to the start of the area. There's not many opportunities to recover lost turtles, so one bad move often leads to resetting the whole game. With all this in mind, picture the scene. You've successfully navigated through the first overworld, beaten up Bebop and Rocksteady, and rescued April O'Neil. She warns you that the Foot Clan are planning to blow up the dam. No problems, right? Turtles should be able to swim down there and disarm the bomb without breaking a sweat. Well, in this case, it's 8 bombs, hidden around an underwater maze, surrounded by deadly electric beams, lethal spinning bumpers, and killer seaweed. Oh, and you have a completely different control scheme and gameplay type to learn on the fly. Oh, and you only get 2 minutes to complete the whole stage. Oh, and some of these obstacles are one-hit kills. Oh, and if you lose a turtle, you go back to the beginning of the stage. Starting to see a problem yet? The layout of the stage requires you to backtrack, and it's easy to get lost the first few times you attempt the level. Some of the seaweed also pulls you in, without any visual cues, causing unsuspecting players to simply drift to their doom. It's also difficult to move the turtles in the water, as they're affected by momentum a lot more than, say, Mario, when he's underwater. This makes it almost impossible to maneuver through even the easy obstacles, let alone some of the more ridiculous traps. There's also no way to restore your turtle's life once you plunge into the water, so you better hope that you conserved your life in the previous side-scrolling levels. Even the music adds to the pressure of the situation, providing an uneasy atmosphere until the last 20 seconds, when it speeds up. It reminds me of the drowning music from the Sonic games. It makes an awful situation that much worse. If you're determined to finish the dam, let me give you 3 pieces of advice. The first is to choose your turtles wisely. This is one of the few times in the game where all turtles are created equal, so use Mike and Raph for as long as you can. Secondly, beware of the beams. It's all too easy to get impatient and try to go quickly through these electric barriers, and you can't risk wasting life that'll be needed to get past the seaweed. Finally, stay calm. You're gonna lose a lot of life during this level. Accept it. Let your turtles get down to near death and cycle through them when necessary. It isn't surprising that this is one of the most infamous water levels of all time. The dam comes right at the beginning of the game. If you look at the game as a whole, it's really the end of what would normally be considered the easy tutorial section. Immediately after you complete it, Splinter is captured, and you're sent to a much larger, tougher overworld. I can imagine many players never even saw this part of the game, and simply put it away when they found the early part of the game this difficult. It's a shame because Turtles has some interesting ideas, and the presentation is great for a game of that era. The game should serve as a warning to other developers about the importance of a reasonable difficulty curve. I mean, if that water level had come maybe halfway through the game, I reckon most players would have been a lot more inclined to persevere. As it stands, it works more like a steel gate, keeping all but the most dedicated players from seeing the majority of the game. I like to think of it as a rite of passage for hardened veterans. So next time you start getting bored of grinding for achievements in your favourite modern first-person shooter, and want to check that your old-school gaming talents are still intact, plug in the NES and take a dive.